It never fails that society's ills and issues and problems become sports and football's issues and ills and problems. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. And what should be a reminder to all of us every day is that we live in a fallen and evil world. And I won't even say that there are evil people out there. I will say that there's an evil element that controls people. And we see indications of it every day, all over the place. And it affects, this is a football channel. It affects football. We could discuss much more important topics, and we could discuss and debate and hopefully do some good in discussing more important aspects of life on a daily basis. But we discuss football here. So once that evil or whatever is going on in the rest of the world affects football, then we discuss it here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. I will take your calls throughout this time together at 860-499-3332. But let me first of all set the stage for our discussion today, and also remind everybody out there that's watching, and I appreciate everybody on the line. I'll remind you that we're open to talk college football all the time. So regardless of what topic I present, and this is a serious, weighty one, you are welcome to call in and let's talk about the Maryland offense, or let's talk about the Purdue defense, or whatever you'd like to talk about concerning college football. I am always open to that. But first and foremost, before I take any calls, let me just discuss for a brief moment the findings. First coming out, I believe this is where I found it, from USA Today. I will not credit the particular writer because I don't have that information in front of me right this second, but USA Today, I believe, was the first to report this, and I saw it late last night. So I don't have the articles in front of me right now, so I may be absent on some names. And actually, after reading through 3 articles on the Michigan situation, I went back and refreshed my memory on Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan State. And I am actually more able to talk and at least reiterate those names involved in the Ohio State, Michigan State, and Penn State situations than I am Michigan. So I don't have any information in front of me. We'll get a producer at some point. So these are reported and documented sexual misconduct charges and have been confirmed. They have been confirmed as much as they possibly can at this point, since the man in question passed away in 2005, I believe, and worked at the University of Michigan for 36 years, from 1967 to 2003. So most of that time was under the football reign of Schembechler. And that's where it ties into our discussion. So this would be no more important or less important had it affected just the basketball team or just the gymnastics team or whatever. But we would not discuss it here if it did not affect football. That's one of the reasons why when the Ohio State situation came up, I don't believe we had several conversations about it. I didn't post a specific video about it, nor did I address it in a call-in show directly. I was asked about it and I responded. I didn't look into it too far. There was no direct tie that I saw. I didn't see any indirect ties to anyone football related at Ohio State. Now, in that situation, Dr. Strauss impacted about 180 student athletes. It's a large university with 30 or 40 sports programs. I don't know if any of those people were football players. Again, that was brought to light, I believe, 2 years ago in 2019. So it's been a couple of years, and I don't recall any football players in particular. Michigan State, there were accusations brought against both Tom Izzo, the basketball coach, and Mark D'Antonio, the football coach at the time, that they were aware. Nothing was substantiated there. Nothing was confirmed. Those were merely allegations. There are going to be allegations against everyone. There are allegations all over the place on all sorts of people. You can find black marks against anyone or insinuated black marks against anyone. So until something's substantiated there, again, that's a situation that went on for years and years and years and years with Frank Lasser, who was heavily involved in Team USA's gymnastics program, and much of the attention on his transgressions were against U.S. Gymnastic Olympians, but also at Michigan State, where he impacted over 300 students. And the Michigan State retribution for that has been something in the $500 million range. The Ohio State retribution, something in the $300 million range, which, of course, is only money and can never erase what was done to those student athletes. All right. At Michigan, what is disturbing here in relation to football, again, separating the acts themselves versus what we deal with here, which is football, is that based on the reports, based on the conversations, the documented legal conversations that were had with student athletes, is that those student athletes brought to the attention of Bo Schembechler misdeeds, grotesque, disgusting acts against them by, I can't even remember the doctor's name. I just read 3 articles on that. But then again, as I mentioned, I went through Penn State, Michigan State, and Ohio State after that. So that's disturbing. And those reported issues and reported communications from football player to Bo Schembechler happened in, I believe, 1976. There was one in around 1982, 83. There was one a little bit later in his tenure. Then there was one after he was still on campus in the building, athletic director, of course, after he retired as football coach in 1989. And he had, Bo Schembechler, an office at the University of Michigan where he was actively participating and actively involved and actively on campus, not necessarily with a role of authority, but until the day he died in 2006. There's 2 basic motivations why anyone would do right or wrong. 2 basic motivations. They could be broken down into hundreds of motivations, but 2 basic motivations that I see for anyone doing anything right or doing anything wrong. And I think we all, as reasonable people who, I hope, most of us watching and discussing this topic right now have good intent, at least. We can discuss maybe at some other point, maybe on some other channel, our spiritual state in our hearts not being the best unless we get some help for that. But that we have good intent, meaning we want people to be given their freedom of speech, given their freedom of right to life, liberty, and happiness, the pursuit of happiness, to be able to be treated with respect, given opportunity, all those things, for people to be protected against these kind of violations, all of that. I believe I'm talking to people that are in favor of what, again, reasonable, loving, caring, clear-minded people would believe to be basic rights of humanity. Okay. So back to the two motivations would be, in my mind, for doing right or doing wrong, for doing good or doing evil, would be number one, that it's in your heart. You know, I need to do this for this person because it's for their best. Or I need to report this. I need to stop this. I need to protect this person because it is in their best interest. This is horrific. This is horrible. So I'm doing this because I care for this individual. This is a wrong. So that's one motivation, out of the kindness of your heart, out of knowing right from wrong. The second motivation would just simply be, I don't want to get caught. I don't steal because I don't want to get caught. I don't violate this person because I don't want to get caught. I want to look good. Okay. Regardless of the motivation here, it appears as though, if these reports are correct, and unfortunately, Bo Schembechler passed away 15 years ago, so he has no platform or ability to respond in any way. And it doesn't even sound like that there's anybody on campus who is necessarily affiliated. That I haven't been able to substantiate in reading 3 articles, whether there's anyone left at the University of Michigan who could have known what was going on. I would think 15 years later that there would still be some old timers around to be questioned. The doctor is no longer with us. Schembechler is no longer with us. But the other motivation, again, to do good or to prevent evil or keep yourself from doing evil, the other motivation would be, I just don't want to get caught. I want to keep my position. I want to keep my reputation, whatever. This is where I don't understand the actions or the failure to act in evaluating Bo Schembechler's thought process in this. Let's say he's a horrible person. Let's say he doesn't care. Let's say he doesn't care if his football players are being abused. That, I don't know. I'm not saying that. There's an indication there, but let's say he doesn't care. Does he have that much loyalty to that doctor? Does he not want to bring this to light because he thinks that's going to reflect poorly on him? We have found out, we have discovered in this society, in the United States, this is one positive. I can point on very little positive in the last 20 to 40 years that's happened in our society. Most of it's gone downhill. But this is what I will point out that I believe has been generally a positive, is that when somebody holds themselves or a situation that they're connected to or an organization, corporation, institution accountable that they are employed by, or they call something to light, bring something to light, even if they're connected, even if they had a trace of blame, possibly, that usually people are forgiving and say, okay, you did the right thing. Now let's clean this up. And actually that particular person in the long run is looked upon favorably, is exonerated, or saying, okay, they did the right thing. Regardless of their motivation, the motivation might have been that I want to do the right thing. I want to protect right and wrong here, or just I'm going to look good. I'm going to be the hero. So I think we've seen many cases of that. I cannot put myself in the place of the victim in any of these situations, because we've seen it in sports. We've seen it connected to entertainment, Hollywood. We've seen it in the clergy, in the Catholic Church in particular. victims not coming forward, victims years later coming forward. I wonder about that. I'm not going to be critical. I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to say, why didn't you speak up then? Because I'm not in that situation. And let's also keep in mind, not in this particular case with Michigan, but in a broader scale, that there are false accusations against people, and there are people in it just to gain some kind of notoriety or money or just to bring somebody down. So what do we, and I'm not talking to anybody in particular here or myself, we're removed from the situation, but in general, meaning we as a society, we as an institution at various schools, what do we do going forward? What do we do to prevent this? Because apparently people at that age, people who feel vulnerable, people who feel disenfranchised, people who feel as though the system is working against them, or the person violating them has so much more power than they do, or they're embarrassed, ashamed that they don't come forward. This seems to be rampant. When does somebody ever come forward? Immediately. Very rarely. So we've got to protect these people. How do we protect these people? How do we prevent these things from happening? Because what we have here is we have a team physician at the University of Michigan in various roles, but team physician for most of 36 years, violating football players. Football players. We're not talking about 13-year-old gymnasts. Football players. And let me correct this. They did speak up at the time, and then they let it go. That seems to be the common theme here, is that they did speak up initially. Then when Schembechler pushed back to say, deal with it or go to the AD, that's a horrible response from a leader. Go to the AD. No, you are the most powerful person at this institution in this state. He just came to you. So even if you're not a caring individual, which a caring individual, regardless if they were the lowest person on the totem pole, would do something about it, but you being the highest, most respected and regarded person, first of all, it's your responsibility, of course. Secondly, you're showing no empathy or care, but to pass it off, that shows an individual who wants to protect themselves if something comes up later, but doesn't want to shake the system, doesn't want to blow things up, doesn't want to expose these disgusting behaviors, and probably knows that that athlete will not go to the AD, or that the AD will turn him down, as apparently happened, and so nothing will come of it. Or if something does come of it, well, the AD failed to act. It is interesting to match up the situation at Michigan versus Ohio State versus Penn State versus Michigan State. You see similarities. You see one similarity, which is obvious. It's the only reason we're discussing it, is that athletes were sexually and physically violated and abused. There are different components to it, though, at each case, in each situation, at each school, that either make it more disturbing or less disturbing. that make the institution more accountable or less. I was looking for the legal term there, and it's escaping me. So with Michigan, it's the football coach at the institution who is the man, the ultimate authority, not technically, but in all practicality, the authority at the institution, if not the entire state, the most powerful, most well-respected, most popular person acting in poor judgment, being an uncaring, being perpetuating a crime. And then you have an athletic director who apparently acted in the same way. I don't know if he's still with us or not. At Penn State, you have an assistant coach who had a lot of power because of his tenure. And with that particular assistant coach, he basically acted in the same way. We're talking about the same violations, the same disgusting actions. And then a number of people who did nothing about it, including, again, the most popular, most respected, the iconic figure, person at that institution in the state, Joe Paterno, not acting as he should have. That involved non-student athletes, though. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong. That involved boys at an organization that Jerry Sandusky worked. He worked and was involved in a nonprofit organization to help boys of a certain age. Michigan State, non-football related, I believe. Well, I shouldn't say that. We had over 300 athletes, but all the specific cases I saw were non-football players. Again, you had that Dr. Lasser. And we went through that situation. Ohio State, 180 impacted. That happened from the early 80s to the mid 90s. There were a lot of attempts to do something about it from various people with some level of power, as I read through that again and refreshed my memory this morning. But it always got stalemated somewhere, and then they finally got rid of him. So they took forever and acted correctly at some point. So they before anything came to public light in a large sense, in a large degree, Ohio State fired Strauss. He committed suicide in 2005. And you would think somebody with those kind of tendencies that committed those kind of awful acts would be pretty disturbed. All right, I'll get to the chat. I'll get to your calls and remind everybody that we can talk college football. We don't have to talk about this, and we don't have to be down in the gutter mentally and emotionally for the rest of the day. In preparing for today's show, I had to move so many things around that took so much more time. And if I don't plug that in, we won't have a show pretty soon. So again, welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We talk college football with you each and every day. I am going to be presenting a channel update here very soon, and a number of changes here at the Voice of College Football. That should be fun. So be looking forward to that. I am deciding whether to post a video or whether to come on here live and discuss it directly with you. Patreon. We've got 48 strong on Patreon. We should be at 4,000. About 15 or 16 cents a day. We get an exclusive live stream on Saturday. Watch parties during the season. Had a watch party during spring practice. Ohio State, Miami. Also, my predictions exclusively there. You could make a few bucks for entertainment purposes only. But the football season will be upon us soon. Join us on Patreon for 15 cents per day. Mark, check that. That would be inaccurate. I believe it's 16 cents per day. Could it be 17? I'll need to do the math. 17 tops per day. Patreon, search MarkRogersTV. You can find the link in the description section. Patreon. Talk to Ronan. He'll let you know. Join us on Patreon. Amazon. Before I get to calls and before I get to the live chat, you see down at the bottom of the screen there, the ticker that says Shop Amazon. Use the link that we provide. I looked this up yesterday because I was having a conversation with a faithful, very loyal viewer. Thank you so much for the conversation. This particular person, while we were having the conversation, I looked it up and said, do you know how many people shop on Amazon each week? This is not in the world. This is in the United States. This is how many people shop at Amazon every month. 160 million. So that's about half the country. So if half of the people that watch our show here with all of you shop Amazon and would use the link in the description section of the videos, same shopping experience, doesn't cost you a penny, doesn't cost you a dime, costs you absolutely nothing. Just save the link, put it somewhere where you'll be able to remember it and find it. Then my mind would be more at ease about this channel being here a year from now. All right, let's dive into, again, your comments. And the phone lines are open at 860-499-3332. Lewis Papp. It was going on before Bo got there, but he was in large part of the problem. But let's not forget the team down south has a similar situation going on as we discussed, Dr. Strauss. Yes. Well, this doctor got there, and I forget his name. I believe if I did the math correctly, he was there 36 years, 2003. He was there in 1967. Bo got there in 1969. He might have gotten there in 1967 and didn't do anything. Regardless, yes, Bo Schembechler didn't hire him. Lewis, the Big Ten really has had a lot of problems with doctors or coaches. Don't forget Michigan State and Penn State, as we discussed. Hey, Kyle. Kyle. So we've got a football channel. Do I have opinions on politics? Do I have opinions on social issues? Yes. I think any of us that have a brain, that care at all, yes, have a lot of opinions on that. I will steer clear of posting anything in particular regarding that because we talk college football here. Sometimes it crosses the line and we got to get into, we had a number of things going on in our country and still do over the last year that spilled into social issues. So we had to discuss those and did. So I'm not going to shy away from them. I'm not going to ignore them if the country's falling apart around me. And I'm not going to be talking about Indiana's defense while there are weightier issues that affect football. But in regards to political stances, I'm not going to post those comments. But Trevor, Michigan State fan. Nasser, what happened at Ohio State, Penn State, they're all disgusting. What the issue is that this has been known since last year and is now finally getting media attention. McD Sports 4, good to see you. Go Terps. Malachi says this is a political topic. Okay. Malachi addressed this off the top. Okay. Penn State happened first, or was reported first, because it both happened, then was reported again first. It dealt with a prominent assistant coach at a major school, major football power. So it is a football discussion because it affects the football program. Okay. Michigan State, I didn't talk about that. At times, people would bring up D'Antonio and some allegations against him, having knowledge of the situation. I didn't look into it. We didn't talk about it. I never saw anything substantial, never saw anything substantiated. We did not talk about the Michigan State situation, not football related. Okay. I brought it up here because it ties into a bigger issue. Okay. Ohio State, not football related. No football coach is connected to it in any way that I have been able to see or have heard anybody talk about. Okay. Doesn't make this the issue any less serious. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the relation to football. So we didn't talk about it. Some people brought it up. I addressed it to a certain extent, but did not look into it, read about it, post videos, talk about it here. Not football related. Michigan comes out yesterday, at least via USA Today. It involves one of the historic coaches in the history of college football, Bo Schembechler. Football related. We're talking about it. Roger, Mark, these are such uncomfortable, delicate, sensitive topics. Times have changed and social media highlights or at least make such said topics come to light just as observation, just an observation. Thank you, Trevor. Robert Anderson. Yes, Dr. Anderson. Michael, how you doing today? Boiler up. I had a request, Michael. I had a request to do a Purdue live stream. We are attempting to put that together. Anyone who would like a live stream for their particular team. Now, this is going to be one time only as it stands right now. And I'll just throw it out there that it's in the works, Michael. Don't get too excited. Don't get too excited. Hang on. It's in the works. And we could have some prominent Purdue people here in the live stream and do a live stream, a one-time deal. I would love to do a weekly Purdue live stream. I would like to do a weekly Oregon live stream, Kansas State live stream. Anybody just has to be supported. Just has to be supported. Has to be financially supported. Okay. Trevor, what is also disturbing is how this was being reported last year right before the pandemic, and the local media just tried to push it under the rug. Malachi, I believe we answered your question. Thank you, Jordan. I don't believe it to be a conference thing. There is nothing that connects these schools in any such way concerning these incidents as being a conference thing or a regional thing or anything like that. We've had similar situations down at LSU. Based on anything we know right now, Jim Harbaugh has nothing to do with this. That is an unfortunate aspect of this, is that, and we saw this most prominently with the Jerry Sandusky Penn State situation, is that people that work at the university, play at the university, go to school at the university, graduated from the university, they are implicated in some way by certain ignorant people because they simply worked or went to school or graduated from said school. That has nothing to do with them. It's an individual acting on their own, and then people in authority, whether that be one person, 2 people, 10 people in authority, did nothing about it. It's isolated to those individuals. Doesn't make anybody bad or horrible by being connected in some way, again, having played for, graduated from, or going to school or working for Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State. Hang on just a second. I got locked out of my monitor here where I can track phone calls. So we've got one coming in. I believe we've got Kevin from Dallas on the line. Welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Good afternoon, Mark. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Wanted to, speak about the subject at hand, and then also, and I'm sure as far as all the listeners and those in the chat, I will complete my all-time teams this month. I will not go into June and the football season all-time teams, but as far as Mark, just need to just address as far as anyone having an issue as far as what is being spoken about. I just want to just state it in this way, and I'm trying to state it as succinctly as well as and be clear. And that is many times in life when it affects someone else, we're reluctant or just straight don't even care when it affects someone else. But then when trouble comes to our doorstep, then that's when we want to voice a concern or it is important. And the thing that we need to be aware of, we have to look at each of these young men as well as each of these young ladies, these boys as well as these girls as our children. And anyone that we have stewardship of, anyone that whether they're 21 or whether they're 10, when they're placed in our care, they're our responsibility. And that being the case, we need to look at them as in caretakers, as in being good stewards of them, looking out not only for their best interests as far as in the present, but as far as 10, 20, 30 years from now. And just as I state that, Mark, I also need to state this too, is that, and I don't want what I'm about to say to sound like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. And it's just that the one thing that I would like as far as starting yesterday, when it comes to men and women, boys and girls that state as far as they're being wronged, as far as anyone that has been the victim of a crime, because this is not what is being talked about is crime. It's not as far as doing someone wrong, but it's a crime. But just as we persecute in the court of public opinion, as well as in, quote, in the law process, when I state that Mark did me wrong, and it's a lie, just as with that same energy that, and when I say you, I'm not talking about you generally, Mark, but as far as universally, just as we state when someone is guilty of something, we need to have that same energy as far as stating that, hey, the person who, for no other way to say it, lied, the same consequences or the same energy needs to be put into that also.
That's a great point, because I've seen, as you have, it sounds like, tons of examples of, and especially now that we've got social media to deal with and everybody's a critic and everybody's going to jump on any kind of allegation out there. And suddenly if somebody gets accused of something, they're already tried and found guilty and damned to hell, and everybody's jumping on them. And there's been a number of times where that person's been cleared and the forgiveness shown, the correction doesn't come anywhere close to the initial hatred and accusations and criticism and ridicule of that individual. I've seen it a number of times through the mainstream media where they can provide if they get a thread of evidence or something in particular, then they're, I saw something just a few weeks ago, putting all sorts of, shocking, eye-popping, attention-grabbing headlines, accusing someone of something, then it turns out to be false, and then they're airing or placing their correction somewhere in about 10% of the space, somewhere else where nobody sees it, and the damage done to that person is never going to be fixed.
Wow. Well, as they say in your business, Mark, as far as we'll join our regular scheduled programming already in progress, and just in reference to the, as far as the three all times, as far as I'm gonna share with y'all, as far as to let it marinate for a moment, that University up north, Michigan State, as well as Nebraska. Here goes.
All right, we get to talk some college football like this. All right,
I'm gonna try. Mark. As far as my all-time University up north. Okay, as far as O-line, Jake Long, Steve Hutchinson, Greg Skrepanak. I can't come up with the other two O-linemen. Quarterback, I'm sorry to say, Mark, I couldn't come up with a quarterback. As far as running back is concerned, I'm going with, and maybe I'm in the prison of the moment of some sort as far as my childhood, I'm going with Tyrone Wheatley. As far as the wideouts are concerned, three wideouts, Anthony Carter, Braylon Edwards, and Desmond Howard. D-line, as well as linebackers, I'm kind of a little shaky as those that just really stuck out. But as far as my DB, as far as Charles Woodson. Now, I'm going to go and do Nebraska, and as far as a young lady, I can't think of a young, I think it may be Cheryl, and I have to do a shout out as far as Cheryl, as far as Michigan State. So I'm going to do Nebraska and Michigan State, then I'm going to be quiet.
So
Mark.
Kevin, do I get a response on Michigan, because I can't contain I can't contain all these names if we keep going. I can't even contain all the responses I wanted to make for Michigan. So I started trying to write them down as fast as I could, but I couldn't get there. All right, offensive line. Dan Deerdorf, who was an All-American in Michigan, early 70s, moved on to the St. Louis Cardinals, was an All-Pro a zillion times over, is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So I'd put him on the offensive line. I would also put Taylor Lewan on the offensive line, who's one of the best left tackles in the NFL right now. And Steve Everett was an All-American center at Michigan in the early 90s, a first-round draft choice at the Cleveland Browns, had a good, not great career in the NFL. Those three come to mind. I'm sure I could come up with others, but those three come immediately to mind at the offensive line. At running back, I'm going to go way back into the 60s, into the 70s, to pull out Ron Johnson, who was a 1,000-yard running back at with the New York Giants and an All-American at Michigan. Rob Lytle was a big running back at Michigan in the 70s who went on to the Denver Broncos and actually had one of the more controversial plays in the AFC Championship game in 1977 against the Oakland Raiders, in which the Raiders believed that he fumbled before he crossed the goal line. The referees gave Lytle and the Broncos the touchdown. They went on to the Super Bowl. Butch Woolfolk was a tremendous running back in Michigan. He was an All-American and went on to the New York Giants. You got Ricky Powers, was a tremendous running back. I would go with you go Ty Wheatley. I still say Ty Wheatley's at the top of the list. I'm just filling in with some other prominent people. Chris Perry was a first-round pick with the Cincinnati Bengals in 2003, 2004. He had a couple of huge seasons at Michigan. Chris Perry was actually the Big Ten MVP in 2003. And then, of course, the all-time leading rusher at the school is Mike Hart, who finished up his Michigan career in 2007.
Can't believe I forgot doggone Everett and Deerdorf though. Can't believe it. Can't believe I forgot those two.
Who'd you have at wide receiver?
I had the three-headed monster: Anthony Carter, Braylon Edwards, and Desmond Howard.
Yeah, those are certainly the obvious ones there. Okay. All right. I'm not going to go through every position, but I could. But
okay.
Let's move on. Yeah, that sounds good.
Oh, okay. Nebraska, a little bit easier. Light lifting as far as Nebraska, except once I got to the doggone specialists and DBs. But as far as quarterback, I went two-headed monsters as far as quarterback, and that's Turner Gill and Tommy Frazier. Running back, I only had one, and that's Mike Rozier. As far as receivers concerned, Irving Fryer, and I guess he would have to, and the gentleman I'm about to say, I guess he would have to either be a wingback or a flanker, Johnny Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the O-line is concerned, the law firm of Remington, Steinkühler, Shields, and Weigert. I couldn't think of the fifth gentleman on the O-line. D-line, Sue, Winstrom, and Neil Smith. And linebacker as far as one of your media colleagues, Trey Alberts. I could not think of any more linebackers and DBs as far as Nebraska.
All right. I would like to see the numbers on Roger Craig when he was at Nebraska. Of course, he's an all-time NFL great with San Francisco. So Roger Craig comes to mind. Tom Rathman comes to mind as a fullback at Nebraska. I think some people might be surprised at how productive Amir Abdullah was at Nebraska. He had two 1,600 to 1,700 rushing seasons in 2013 and 14. Had 22 touchdowns one of those years. So he was a tremendous, even though it wasn't during Nebraska's heyday, they weren't as good. Jarvis Redwine was a great Nebraska back in the late 70s. Kenny Bell is actually the all-time leading receiver at Nebraska if you're just looking for catches and yardage. Not saying that he was better than Irving Fryer, who was the number one pick in the NFL draft, but he comes to mind. Levante David, tremendous linebacker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Nebraska. And I'm thinking of somebody else, and he's slipping my mind. We also have, he was kind of a one-year wonder, but he spun it into a big NFL paycheck, and that's Randy Gregory at defensive end, who's now with the Dallas. Well, he's had so many legal problems. I don't know if he's still with the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, I'm sure we've missed a ton, but that's those are the guys that come to mind off the top of my head. Eric Crouch won a Heisman Trophy at quarterback, but he doesn't rank with the two guys that you mentioned.
And last but certainly not least, as far as for the lovely Miss Cheryl, as far as Michigan State.
I think we've got to give Lawrence Phillips. I'm sorry, Kevin. Before we move on to Michigan State, I think we'll give Lawrence Phillips certainly a note there. As a great.
As far as on the college side, yes,
running back.
Definitely on the college side.
Okay.
Now, as far as Michigan State initially, full disclosure, Mark, I thought it was going to be like pulling teeth, and it was just maybe one extraction, as far as using modern medical procedures, but it wasn't as bad. As far as the quarterback is concerned, Kirk Cousins, running back only one, and that's Lorenzo White. As far as wide receivers, 3, and that's Andre Rison, Plaxico Burress, and Charles Rogers. Tight end, Billy Joe Dupree. The O-line, I could only come up with 2, and that was Tony Mandrich and Flozell Adams. On the D-line, I could only come up with 2, and that's Bubba Smith and Larry Bethea. At linebacker, I could only come up with 1, and that was Percy Snow. Help me out, Mark.
I would like to help you out, Kevin. Actually, Michigan State ranks higher on NFL all-time draft boards than I think most people would. Their ability to move players onto the NFL outranks them as a college football power. They're a pretty marginal college football program overall. I might offend some Michigan State fans, but excluding a couple quick peaks in the 50s and 60s and a Rose Bowl appearance in the late 80s, and of course Mark Antonio's first 5 or 6 years, this has been a pretty much 55% winning program forever. But they've churned out NFL players. I saw a list the other day. I didn't see the actual player list, just the numbers list, that they're in that top 12 or so in all-time NFL draft selections. All right. Man, I'm not coming up with anybody. Anybody else? I don't want to waste a lot of people's time sitting here hemming and hawing trying to remember Michigan State players that you did not mention. I'm sure some people will dive into the chat with some, but yeah, I love what you're doing. We may attack this as well in a more complete way with a number of people contributing and put together, all-time teams. Love it.
And one item, briefly, Mark, and then after this, I will exit stage right, and that is when it comes to transfer, as far as this transfer portal, and just briefly, as far as once again, that university is located in Tuscaloosa, and as far as tonnage, taking its talents to the University of Georgia, and I just find it ironic over the past 5 years is that 2 DBs have left the University of Alabama to go to Georgia. But there, in that same period of time, there have never been any kids go from Georgia to Alabama. And it just kind of blows me away that 2 kids could go that way, but then none of them go to Alabama. I mean, just kind of, and hey, pray and hope the best as far as for the young man. And the first young man it was a matter of a family, as far as I think the mother was ill, and he was a grad transfer from the University of Alabama, and it was the year that Eddie Jackson got hurt. And it was a matter, I know the doggone Saban kicked the fit as far as them transferring to Georgia, but hey, it was what it was at that time. But I just find it, I really can't even find the word, Mark, as far as kids going that direction instead of the other direction.
So you came up with 2.
Well, as far as those 2, as far as that I could think of that transferred from Alabama to Georgia. But I couldn't think of any kids that transferred from Georgia to Alabama.
So it's not like 9. It's 2. So
from Georgia to Alabama?
Yeah.
I mean, Alabama to Georgia, excuse me? Oh, wow.
You said it's no. What I'm clarifying is you're saying 2 have left Georgia, 2 have left Alabama to go to Georgia, 0 have left Georgia to go to Alabama.
Yes, sir.
But I'm not seeing a trend there. It's only 2-0.
But no, I mean, but even with those 2, I mean, because initially, Mark, it was a matter of the quote, the unwritten written rule was you didn't transfer in the conference. And
Sure.
then we see this year, you know, you have 2 within maybe the past maybe about a week or so. So, but just Alabama, Georgia, that dynamic just for whatever reason, it made me laugh in a respect. I mean, so because that's just had not been the norm.
I got
Because
you.
it was, I don't know whether you're probably aware of it as far as that there was a little bad blood as far as when, you know, he gave him the blessings as far as the dawn, you know, as far as too smart, as far as saying, hey, you know, you can hey, wish you the best as far as to the University of Georgia, but I don't want you to take any of the assistance as well as anything off the board. And board, you know, another name for recruit. And then needless to say, you know, Smart heard him, but he didn't listen. And he did both of those things. He took the assistant coaches as well as those prime recruits, which, hey, those prime recruits now are guys that are juniors now at the University of Georgia. So.
Well, I would always expect any type of unwritten agreements or loyalties or, again, agreements between friends to lessen and weaken as time goes on when it comes to business.
I agree, Mark, but that was going out the door, though, as far as those agreements were concerned. So that's the reason why I just find it. I mean, that's the reason why I'm laughing, because it's just that, hey, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with you, but it's just a matter as it's one thing as time goes on, that being the case, but, you know, as far as you're heading out the door and, hey, you know, not only am I leaving, but, hey, I'm going to take a couple of your assistants as well as everyone that you said that don't take off your 5-star list, I'm taking them. So, but.
Well, that Georgia secondary needs help.
Yes.
Georgia's secondary lost 3 cornerbacks to the NFL draft: Webb, Campbell, and Stokes. They lost their defensive leader in Richard LeCount, safety. They did pick up Tyke Smith from West Virginia, who is a tremendous nickel corner. He's not going to play the boundary. He's going to play the nickel star position, and he was a second-team All-Big 12 performer. And now, basically, what they've got, other than those guys, is this just long list of 4- and 5-star guys that have very little experience. Now, I'm not saying I'm not going to go through the whole list of defensive backs for Georgia, but basically they came out of camp with a depth chart with 2 very inexperienced cornerbacks, number 1 on the depth chart. And they pick up this one from West Virginia who's going to play the slot corner and the nickel corner, and they're hurting. So Turnage isn't necessarily going to help them because he's just another guy that's going to be very inexperienced, but he's got a 4-star next to his name, and he was a top 10 cornerback coming out of high school who didn't even step on the field for Alabama. So they've got a ton of those kind of guys. I expect Georgia to be in the transfer portal looking for more experience in the secondary. And they lost Tyreek Stevenson to Miami as well.
Yeah. And wouldn't it be safe to say, Mark, that that's going to be the theme as far as even with those, quote, top 4, top 5 teams, as far as, yes, the talent is there, but then the inexperience, and that as far as in some cases you're going to find some schools that's going to have to lean heavily as far as on their defense, say maybe the first quarter of the season, and then that'll give the opportunity as far as for most of the teams as far as that are going through that transition at quarterback to get their legs on them and et cetera. And then because the craziest thing is when in reference to the SEC is that the doggone most experienced quarterback coming back in the SEC is doggone Matt Corral. Yeah. So that says a lot as far as as far as the amount of talent that was lost as far as this past season, as far as the SEC. And just thankful that, hey, instead of going to Oxford this year, that, hey, they'll be coming to Tuscaloosa. So. And one last thing, Mark, and that is we do have a punter. We did get a punter as far as in the transfer portal, so from Troy State. So I think he averaged, it was 46 yards a punt. So, hey, Saban has to do what he has to do. Like I said, Mark, he's pushing all the chips into the middle of the table. So, hey, we're getting punters in the transfer portal now. So I guess we're gonna, I guess the next step would be getting a place kicker or a grad assistant from the transfer portal too. So, but again, thanks for always as far as indulging, Mark. You take care and have a good day. And I'm gonna sit back and continue listening to the program.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Have a good day.
Hey,
Kevin actually started to touch upon a good point when it comes to kickers in the transfer portal. This may become something close to what goes on in the NFL. In the NFL, these kickers are so good, they're expected to make 80-some% of their field goals, and they kick them from 50 yards on a regular basis. So these kickers have become so good in the NFL that if you miss a couple kicks, unless you've got some like 10-year track record of being great, if you miss a couple kicks in the NFL, move on. You're gone. We're looking for somebody else. And, of course, it's not going to happen in season in college football. It can't. The transfer portal is going to be dead during the season, or if somebody wants to enter it, they're going to have to wait. I did hear a June 1st deadline. I heard anyway, I'm not going to substantiate that. But in regards to off season, thinking, I need a kicker. And the kickers are a different breed, not just in terms of they're not football players. They don't play football. They don't hit and block and do all that. They're just not football players. I don't consider them football players. They're part of the football team. They're important. I'm not downgrading their importance, but they just don't play football. They don't run. They don't play football. Now, some of them will cover a punt, cover a kickoff, and make a tackle. They kind of became a football player there. But anyway, so there is importance there. And what's different about the kicking specialists is that many of the better ones in the country drop down into lower levels of the group of five. If you look at the NFL top kickers, it's not like other positions where most of them came from places you would guess they would come from. LSU, Oklahoma, Oregon, Ohio State, Alabama, Florida. The kickers, a lot of the best kickers drop into the group of five ranks. I would think that those top teams would be out there looking for kickers because they're difficult to scout in high school. All right, more calls coming in. Let's grab them here at the Voice of College Football. I believe we've got DeAndre on the line. It'd be good to hear from him. DeAndre, what's going on?
What's up, Mark? Man, it seems like it's been a long time since you had a live show.
Has it? I guess I need to. I need some encouragement to do some. I need some people on here talking to me.
Oh man, yeah. What I'm about to ask you about question. And I know if you don't know this, I don't know if you know this, but Clemson defense that went up to against Joe Burrow. I know Tyler Davis was a freshman. I know the two defensive backs were just coming back. But you would say that team lost a lot of talent on it from the following year. I know they had 5 players drafted in the first 2 rounds off the defense. The 3 defensive linemen, Kendrick, and I think a safety went in, not Kendrick, but AJ Terrell. So I guess my question is, Clemson defense was really, really young last year, especially with all the injuries and COVID, because Foster and X-Man didn't play. And so this coming up year, do you think that we're going to get a great defense performance like we did a couple years ago? Oh, I don't know how I forgot Simmons. Simmons was the top pick 2 in the first round. So you had about 6 people going in the top 2 rounds. So you think Clemson defense is going to be just as good as it was last year? I mean, about 2 years ago?
Do you think the 2019 defense was better than the 2018 defense?
Some ways. It's hard to say because, like I said, if you look at that defense that was 2019, you lost Xavier Thomas. He only played half the year. You lost Foster. Tyler Davis was hurt the whole year. And you lost Simmons, who was a unique player. Simpson is taking this spot, but he's a freshman. So I think this year defense is going to be really great. What you think? For Clemson?
Well, before we get to 21's defense, I'm just thinking about what that 18 defense accomplished at the end of the year. Okay. They played Pitt in the ACC championship game. And they couldn't score. I know they scored 10 points, but they couldn't score, and they couldn't even complete a pass in that game. Like, they had less than 10 yards passing. And then they move on to the playoff. Yeah. And of course, Notre Dame wasn't some great explosive dynamic team, but they scored points. They had a great offensive line and running backs and Ian Book at quarterback. They scored 3 points. And then that Alabama offense that was so prolific that year, and then the following year with an NFL first-round quarterback and all that talent, they couldn't score after the first quarter.
Right.
I just think that 18 defense, just looking at the results, I'm not looking at the personnel. And, of course, the defensive line might be the greatest in the history of the game.
Well, I think, and I know this saying a lot because we haven't seen them do it yet. But, again, I go back to most of these guys were freshmen and sophomores last year. And because of COVID and a lot of COVID-related injuries, I think this team has a chance to be just as good. I mean, think about it. Look how good Simpson looked compared to Simmons as a redshirt freshman. I mean, Simpson got right out there. I know he had to sit behind Mike Jones, but if you go look at towards the end of the year, he was taking Mike Jones' rep and doing some of the same things that Simmons was doing. Now, defensive back, I don't think they're as good as I don't think they're as good as the 2018. But along the defensive line, you might be able to say so. With Tyler Davis, Breezy, Murray as a they're in their second season. Who else do you got?
So yeah, Murphy's probably the best player right now, and Bressy's got the most talent. And Tyler Davis was missed a whole lot last year. Now, hopefully, he's going to play a full season. And then you got Xavier Thomas. Maybe he'll fulfill his potential as a 5-star.
And think about it. You got Foster coming back. I mean, look how good he was when he wasn't hurt. And Mascal, he does a pretty decent job too. That defense got a chance to be really special. I can't wait to see this matchup with Georgia. And it's going to be so interesting along the offensive defensive line. I think Georgia's going to have a really good offense. I know they're missing their best receiver, but I mean that matchup over the when they come to play in a couple months, I think it's going to be really nasty up front. Now I know who's going to win. I just heard you say Georgia secondary might have a lot of issues early until they get to replace some of those guys, and they get started and Clemson's loaded at receiver. But that's going to be an interesting game, man. I can't wait to see it. But I was just asking to see what you thought about Clemson's defense for the last coming up year, this past year. I wanted to see what you had to say about it. 2021.
Well, I think their safety play needs to. I think their safety play needs to improve.
Well, you know what? Jason and Bobby have stole some of my talking points. Because remember we were talking about Cameron Jackson and how they might move him into guard and tackle. And Jason was like, I really don't look past it. When me and him was on the show together, I don't look past what they do in college into the NFL. And then I heard him mention on one of your shows that Cameron Jackson probably move over to right tackle. And I said, I've been saying that, Jason. And then also, I forgot my boy's name. Bobby Dorkin Stokes said something I said earlier in one of your shows too, that there's a lot of favoritism by Dabo playing some of the players that he favored, like Turner. There's some guys on that safety thing on their safety that might be better than Turner, but because he has a love for Turner, those guys don't get in. And I don't want to say Skalski and Spector, their experience is good, but I know you guys. I think the linebacker number 17 is better than both of them, and he don't even get on the field. He was a 4-star to New Orleans. I can't remember his name right now, and he don't even get on the field right now. So, yeah, that's what I was looking at. But yeah, Mark, go give some other people a chance to talk. I just wanted to let you know, see what you thought about the defense.
Well, I think the defensive line's the best in the country. And I think that you've got one of the great defensive coordinators, and you got 10 starters coming back. So I do think that it's probably going to be a top 5 defense in the country. And the more you hype it up, DeAndre, the more I'm going to consider Clemson in my predictions, and the more I'm going to maybe back off on what I'm thinking about this Georgia game as we get into the summer, because their secondary could be really vulnerable.
How you doing? Oh, yeah. Especially if Clemson receivers live up to the hype at receiver. They live up to the hype, man. They're gonna be excellent on offense next year. If they get that offensive line to block, and I know they remember Mr. Cameron Jackson, but and their center, but they brought in the number 1 center. He was an earlier Rowley, and they got another guy they like at center. So that position gets certified, and you already got the receivers, you already got the good tight ends that Galloway and them play. Well, running back, I mean, you got 4 of them to choose from. I know Mich transferred, but I mean, that's one of the what they say, one of the easiest positions to transfer to outside of the blocking. So, I mean, I think we have a chance to be really, really good next year. And like I said, I really don't know enough about Georgia. I don't know about their defensive line and linebackers, but I know they've had top recruiters for the last, 3 or 4 years. So, you know they got talent. You just haven't heard about the players yet. So we're going to see what that leads us to. So, but I think it's going to be a heck of a game. I'm looking at maybe close to 35, Georgia 31 or 28. That's what I'm looking at.
All right.
So, but and a running back, those running backs, those linebackers and safeties that are coming ready to hit, because Georgia got some great running backs. But all right, Mark, I'll be listening to the show, buddy.
Thanks, DeAndre. Appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much for that.
Always, Mark. We got to support everybody. Get out there. Just give the man $2. He putting the best content out there.
Well, we hope to do better. Thank you, DeAndre.
Yeah, you got the best content out there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Have a good one. All right. Let's move it along the phone lines with some more regulars here. David Greenshield, how's it going today?
Well, the man that gives college football its voice. I had to chime in with my thoughts on this one. I don't want to disparage, a man that I actually have a lot of respect for. I've heard some comments in the chat, Mark. Do you draw any parallels to this with the Paterno-Sandusky situation, or do you think there are any parallels?
besides the act itself, parallels would be if there's a head football coach, especially of that stature, who has knowledge or at least is being communicated accusations that can't confirm it based on the conversations with, let's say in Schembechler's case, players complaining, giving concerns. That's a better way to state it. Communicating concerns and him not acting on it. I draw that comparison and that connection between Michigan and Penn State.
Okay. Now, does this because he was there 20? Because he was there for the 20 years as the coach, and then what was he there 3 or 4 years as an athletic director?
Yeah, it wasn't a long time.
How long is the age? Yeah.
And then I don't know how active he was. He had a office. A lot is made of having an office on campus until the day he died. And I'm sure that he was shaking a lot of hands and talking to a lot of boosters and doing those sorts of things. I don't know. I'm not gonna consider him to be plausible past having an official active role in the athletic department.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the biggest things, and I maybe I kind of remember this being talked about, when he retired, that was put out there. Obviously, his success. I mean, he did never win a national championship while he was there. He had a bunch of good teams. I mean, he went to more Rose Bowls than any other Big Ten coach, which, is a great achievement. I believe he went to 10 Rose Bowls, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mark?
Yeah, 2 and 8.
Yeah. As the famous line was at the time, because the Bo Jackson commercials were out there about Bo knows. Well, Bo didn't know roses. So I will mention that to the team up north fans, I'm sure, as they remember. Always seemed to lose every Rose Bowl by a touchdown, by the way. Didn't he, Mark?
Yeah.
They always seem to be close.
Pretty much. Yeah. You pretty much covered it. They rarely lost one by more than a touchdown. UCLA beat them by 10. So that's being nitpicky a little bit, but yeah, you pretty much nailed it. Warren Moon, Washington, that game was like 27-20. The 2 USC games right after that were both like 14-10, and the other one was something in that range. Yeah, the earlier they lost to Stanford, his first Rose Bowl, 13-12. They lost to
that's the closest he went to going undefeated.
Yeah,
I think.
Actually would have been his second Rose Bowl. But yeah, and then even the last game that he coached was, I can't come up with the score off the top of my head, but he had just beaten USC for his second Rose Bowl win after the 88 season. Then they went back and played USC again, and unfortunately didn't get the send-off that you would think that he would deserve. And they lost by a score that last game. Yep.
Well, he had, pardon me, Mark, he had 2 really good teams his last 2 years. The 88 team only lost by a combined 3 points to the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country. Because Miami, and they lost, on a field goal to Notre Dame the first game of the year. They almost beat them on a field goal. And then they blew a big lead against Miami in 88, or, they could have won both of those games.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then 89, he loses because he kicks the ball off to Rocket Ismail when he should go. And then 89, he loses in the Rose Bowl to Robo quarterback Todd Marinovich and Ricky Irvin to the really good USC team.
Yeah. Todd Marinovich.
I still remember him. Yeah. I still remember him running off the field, and the guy from ABC couldn't get him for a comment. Do you remember that?
After his last game?
Yeah. the commentator for ABC at the time.
I don't remember that.
But yeah, I mean, from our perspective as an Ohio State fan, we'll always remember the 10-year war, though. So, I mean, it was an incredible time.
Yeah, even into the matchups with Earl Bruce, it was a far cry from what we see now, where we really didn't know who was going to win year to year, even if a certain team was having a better season. And during that time, most of that time, they were typically having they were typically having comparable seasons. There wasn't a whole lot of one showing up 10-0 and the other one's 5-5. You know, they were both good, but not great. They were both fringe top 10 teams a lot during those years.
Right.
After you know, near the end of Woody and then into Earl Bruce. Not talking about Woody in his prime, not talking about, you know, early to mid 70s, but those last couple of Woody teams and then into the Earl Bruce day. You know, Earl Bruce, as you well know, aside from that 79 inaugural season, never came close to a national championship run.
Sure. Well, what was the line, Mark? He was 9-3 Earl there for.
Yeah, he was.
You know, pretty much. You know,
and he only broke it with a 10-3.
Right.
So it was 9-3 from
87 was.
Well, he went 9-3 from 80 through 85. So that's 6 consecutive 9-3 seasons. And then you might as well say the next season was 9-3 because it was 10-3. So he had 3 losses, 7 consecutive seasons before his final year.
Right. And they were 6-4-1, I think, his final year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they had that run of excruciating losses. That offense was just painful to watch.
Oh, bad. Oh, yeah. Well, it did end well by beating Bo, you know, with them wearing the Earl headband. So, and you know what? Bo was very complimentary. You know, he said that he always hated to lose to Ohio State, but, you know, that was a great win.
Yes. Yeah, he had a lot of respect for Earl Bruce.
He did. And you know what? I was sad when Bo passed in 06. I think, remember, Mark, it was right before the game happened, too.
Sure.
Didn't that, I thought that added something to it, you know? In 06.
It sure did. Yeah. Lewis Papp is commenting in the section here in the live chat that Bo was the AD from 88 to 90. He did win 2 national championships, but they weren't claimed. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, now, of course, the famous line from Bo was when Steve Fisher took over for Bill Frieder as basketball coach before the NCAA tournament. That was in 89. Yeah, that was the 89 run to the national championship. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Glenn Rice and that really good basketball team they had.
Yeah, Glenn Rice and Ramil Robinson.
Yeah, they beat Seton Hall. I remember that great game for the national title in Seattle, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was at the Kingdome against oh shoot, I can't remember the Seton Hall coach. Oh my word, PJ Carlesimo. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that game went to overtime.
Let me ask you this one thing, Mark. Do you think that Bo, when they had that run where they did not make a Rose Bowl because they couldn't beat Ohio State in the 70s, remember they changed the rule? I think it was in 75, where the Big Ten went to, allowing more than one team to go to a bowl game.
Yeah, Michigan was
until 74.
Sure. Yeah, Michigan was the first team out of the Big Ten to go to a bowl game other than the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma after the 75 season.
Right. Yeah, they went, 32-1 from 72 to 74 and didn't play in a bowl game. That's unbelievable when you think about it.
The Big Ten, for as much as I love the Big Ten, and I think the approach to what they do from a athletic standpoint in balancing the academics is typically on point. Um, the conference has been a bit archaic and outdated, and I know that at times there's a fine line between preserving history and tradition, and those things are important in collegiate athletics, and we focus on football, of course. So I am all for the tradition and the pageantry and connecting to the past and all that, but there needs to be, some awareness as to what's going on around you and how to stay competitive and be relevant. And yeah, I think they hurt themselves for quite a long time by not participating in bowl games.
Right.
And they had teams before that, David, as you well know, that should have been playing for national championships or having at least a shot to be considered for a national championship in Rose Bowl games that didn't get the chance because they didn't send teams consecutive years to Rose Bowls. That was ridiculous.
Well, that was the thing about 1969. The worst, his greatest victory, by the way. And he would still say to this day, which started the 10-year war, right, Mark? The 1969 victory.
Yeah.
And Woody said to this day that was his best team. Said it before the game, if I'm not mistaken. And they wouldn't have gone to the Rose Bowl had they won that game because of the no repeat rule, I believe, at the time. That was going to be their last game.
I don't know when that ended because it was just a few years later that, of course, Ohio State played in 4 consecutive Rose Bowls.
Yeah, 72 to 75. The Archie Griffith team.
Maybe Woody Hayes should not have made that comment before the game. It reminds me of the comment Urban Meyer, David, made after the 2012 Michigan game, because every week they're grinding away, slipping by, getting these wins, but improving, the whole narrative to that season and how it played out. And they got better and better and better, but they were never truly a great team based on the eyeball test. But and Urban Meyer, every time they would say, "Oh, you're 8-0. What about your team?" And he'd always downplay and say, "We got a lot of work to do. We're really not that good." And he loved his team and would say all the positive things in terms of their effort and how they were working hard. But he would say, we're not a finished product. We're really not that good. And then I remember you talk about a sideline reporter at ABC, or it would have been at it would have been ABC, because it was it was after the Michigan game that after they beat Michigan and, of course, had no postseason play, so there was nothing else to prove. The reporter said, and I can picture him, I just can't come up with his name, said, "Urban, you've been saying all season as you've won game by game by game that this is not a great football team." And before he could say anything else, Urban cut him off and said, No. This is a great all-time Ohio State football team. This is a great team. And because why not? Nothing else needs to be proven. Nothing else can be said about it. You're undefeated. And I thought it was funny, but it certainly, I didn't blame him for saying that, because sure, why not talk him up now?
Right. And wouldn't you know, Urban would go on to have better teams than that team.
Oh, sure.
Right. So, excuse me. A couple thoughts on this season, Mark. Had you heard anything about the transfer linebacker from USC to Ohio State?
I've not heard anything.
Help me out.
I don't know if you caught our conversation on Wednesday in the Buckeyes Live show. That's I haven't looked into it since then.
I'm trying to think of do you have the name, by the way? It was a Polynesian linebacker.
Oh my goodness. Are you going to make me say that? I have to see it phonetically. It's Peo Nagoa Teate. That's my best pronunciation, trying to picture it in my mind.
Well, I was having a hard enough time with Henry What was it?
As it turns out with Henry, I may personally, everybody had their own interpretation. I saw all sorts of and heard all sorts of enunciations on that name. And I probably overthought it myself because there's a TO, then there's an apostrophe, then there's an OTO, then there's another apostrophe, then there's an O. And I was trying to like sort all that out, where I think it's just toe. I think that's all there is to it.
Right. Well, I mean,
yep.
No, we could use a little bit of help at that position. I mean, linebacker's a bit of a concern coming into this year. And, I mean, whether it be the transfer, I mean, we've got some younger guys with potential. I think Dallas Gant is a guy that's got some potential. We'll see about Javon Pope and some of these other guys. But, I'm still concerned about the secondary after last year, although I think Seven Banks has some potential, and they also have some younger guys that are going to need to step up. But, yeah, the back seven of the defense is going to be the key to the season, in my view. So
there's a Vanderbilt linebacker, Dimitri Moore, who's in the portal, and I'm not going to pretend to know much about him. I'm not watching Vanderbilt football. His stat line looks good from a productivity standpoint, but again, you could be a lower caliber player playing at Vanderbilt and be a good player, but not the type player that Ohio State should be starting, and you're going to rack up tackles. So that's what he did. 2 years ago, he had 100 tackles at Vanderbilt. So he's in the portal, but I haven't seen anybody else. I think Nagea Teote, I believe that he is a better prospect. At least that's what the recruiting rankings tell us.
Yeah, 4-star, if I'm not mistaken, right,
yeah.
Mark? Okay, all right. Yeah, I would love to see them pick him up. I would think he probably could start right away. Just at least where we're at right now, we could use the help or at least use the depth. Because I think the D-line is going to be really strong again. I love our DNs. And I think our D-tackles with getting Haskell Garrett back are going to be really good. But it's just that back seven of the defense. And as we've said, every great Ohio State defense has really good corners. So this goes all the way back to the 90s. You know that better than I do, right, Mark? So that's going to be a concern, especially, with where college football's at today. So.
Yeah, it is a concern.
Go ahead.
It's a big concern. All right, David.
All right, Mark, you take care now.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Yeah, while Ohio State's recruiting is at its best place, arguably its best place in history, the cornerback position and the secondary as a whole should be better this year just because it can't get any worse with those type of athletes. But after this last wave of great players left, Arnett, Fuller, Okudah, of course, who's special in that secondary? Shaun Wade was supposed to be, and is, in fairness to him, proved to be when placed correctly in the secondary in the slot corner position. But man, there's nobody coming back who's an excellent player, who's proven at the collegiate level to be an excellent player. And that's concerning. They've got stars next to their names to where the odds would tell you, based on the coaching and based on the talent that's been recruited and signed, that enough of them should be able to step up and become all Big Ten type players. Forget All-Americans. I don't think they've got any All-Americans in that defensive secondary, but I mean legit Big Ten players, not all Big Ten, Shaun Wade, Big Ten defensive back of the year. Who in the world was voting on that? I have no idea who in the world was voting. I'm somewhat asking that rhetorically because it was Big Ten media voting on the all Big Ten various categories. And for Shaun Wade to be voted the Big Ten defensive back of the year, again, to a certain extent, no fault of his, being asked to do something different, being given a different and a higher, more difficult responsibility, but he wasn't the best defensive back on the team. The media voting on all Big Ten and voting for Shaun Wade to be the Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year in 2020, even if you didn't watch anybody else in the Big Ten play, you watched no other Big Ten games, and just watched Ohio State play every week, he wouldn't have been, because you would have assumed, oh, there have to be other players better. And then on top of that, if you had only watched Northwestern play, Northwestern had 2 defensive backs that were all Big Ten, arguably all America status. Sometimes it's just mind-boggling what goes on in some aspects of media coverage. Now, fortunately, we're talking about football, so it's not that important. It's not going to cost anybody a job, or it's not going to cause masses of people to think the wrong way about a certain topic or a certain person or politician or something like that. It's only football, but still. I think my classic example was back in the 90s when Rafael Palmeiro was awarded a Gold Glove in baseball. So you non-baseball fans, you got a Gold Glove at each position. Basically means that that particular player was considered the best fielding player at that position. Rafael Palmeiro, in a season of 162 games, played 28 games at first base and DH'd the rest of the season, but the baseball writers awarded him a Gold Glove. That should have been reviewed. Every writer who voted for Rafael Palmeiro, I would have given them their day in court to explain, but most likely I would have taken away their vote. We have people voting for the Heisman Trophy that don't know anything about college football. There are so many votes for the Heisman Trophy. What is the final vote total? It's something like 800, 900. And the only reason I say that is I've been given indication in some areas of so-and-so as a Heisman vote. They don't know anything about football. They don't cover it. They don't. And where I live in the Northeast, I moved here in 2001/2, meaning the last week of 2001. I moved here because that's when I started at ESPN. And I started listening to the Mike and the Mad Dog show. Mike and the Mad Dog, Mike Francesa, and the Mad Dog, Chris Russo, who's a big baseball guy. Tremendous show. Amazing show. Loved the show. Loved it. Perfect contrast of hosts. You had one guy who's the more intellectual, who understands the structure of organizations and front offices and the role of a general manager, that guy, who, if you had to listen to him all day, every day, may put you to sleep at some point. But you counter that with the guy that's excitable and rants and raves and screams and hollers and goes nuts. Not that he doesn't know anything, because he was a huge baseball guy and to a lesser extent NFL guy. But they wouldn't talk about college football all season. Zero. They would talk more Yankees in November than college football. Zero. Then suddenly, if there was a huge, enormous game on the college football map, the final weekend of the season, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn, that would wake them up. They'd talk a little bit about it. They wouldn't know any players. Now, I say this knowing that Mike Francesa worked at CBS covering college football prior to that, well prior to that. We're talking in the 1980s into the 90s. But they both had Heisman votes, and they didn't even know who quarterbacks were on the top teams in the country. Yeah, Chris Russo, that guy can rant and rail for hours without taking a breath. He's going to mispronounce about 17 names in the process, and I know I just butchered the USC guy's name, but I'm talking about during this conversation, he probably would have botched Schembechler. But yeah, he's a tremendous guy as a broadcaster. I don't know him personally, but I enjoy him, but in doses. The Heisman is a popularity contest. Whoever has most media buzz and team reputation. That's why ESPN can affect it through commentary. Player for Alabama has an advantage. Well, John, I understand what you're saying, and there is some validity to your comment, but I don't necessarily know that that plays out. Let's consider, first off, that Alabama never won a Heisman Trophy until 2009. Alabama had no Heisman trophies, 0 until 2009. Okay. Let that sink in. No Heisman trophies, 2009. Mark Ingram, 2009. Derrick Henry, 2015. I would not have voted for Derrick Henry myself, but it's not as though I thought it was undeserving. I was a Christian McCaffrey guy. I remember posting a video outlining why Christian McCaffrey should have won the Heisman Trophy, but not saying Derrick Henry did not deserve it. He ran for 2,000 yards. And then, of course, this past year, I don't think anybody who watched Devontae Smith play for more than 10 minutes has an issue with him winning the Heisman. I was won over. And I tend to downgrade the importance of receivers. They're the most dependent position on the field. They are the most dependent players on the field. The receiver doesn't do anything if the quarterback can't throw in the ball. And of course, the quarterback's dependent to a large extent, not completely, but to a large extent on the offensive line. So the receivers, I think, are generally overrated. Less so now than they used to be, because now they're getting the ball constantly and it's a different game. But I think even 10 or 15, 20 years ago, it's a great position to watch. They're the best athletes on the field. They're the most fun athletes to watch for most fans because of what they do, because they can jump high and run fast and zigzag around the field. And people like to see spectacular catches. But they're the most dependent players on the field. So I'm generally going to knock down the receiver position a rung or two in my evaluation for a Heisman Trophy, which makes me think I may be posting a Heisman Trophy video here soon, or a number of them. But Devontae Smith was so overwhelmingly great that I went from, I was a Trask guy, because he carried the weight of that Florida offense the entire season. So to compare Trask and Mac Jones, because they're in the same conference, you could bring Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields into the conversation. But Fields, of course, played 2 off games in bigger games and disqualified himself. Trevor Lawrence, in my mind, disqualified himself based on the COVID situation and not playing against Boston College and the biggest game of the season at Notre Dame. Okay, so for me, it was a Mac Jones, Kyle Trask competition down the stretch. Trask had more weight on his shoulders by far because their defense wasn't as good. He had to score more points. They did not have a running game. They basically gave up running the football. Florida basically threw up their hands and said, we're not running the ball the last half of the season. And they ran it 12 times a game. They threw the ball a higher percentage certainly than any team in the top 25, and I believe close to more so than any team in the nation. So it was on Kyle Trask to outplay the defense, outscore his own defense, what they were going to give up, and then also not have a running game to keep the defense honest. So I was giving him the favor over Mac Jones, who had the great defense on the other side, especially when they worked things out early in the season after the Ole Miss game, and had Najee Harris. We'll just start with him. We don't have to mention the other three great backs. So Mac Jones had more going for him and a better offensive line. So I was a Trask guy for most of the season, but he faltered to a certain extent. Much of it not his fault, but his team faltered as well. I thought Mac Jones, I was thinking Mac Jones late in the season, like last 2 weeks. And then after I really put it all together, after the SEC championship game, I was like, this is for the best player. Mac Jones is not the best player. He is functioning at the highest level of efficiency as a quarterback. But Devontae Smith's the best player. Done. I did not even think it was close. A lot of good comments coming in. Appreciate that, as always. David, I know. And that's partially not their problem, partially not their fault. It's their responsibility. They should be knowledgeable about anything. They're being paid slightly more than me, gobs of money to be informed and have reasonable, they should have very poignant points, meaning they should be out thinking the rest of us. And yes, they don't follow college football. But it's difficult because it's an NFL and NBA show. But then they hit you with, okay, it's the World Series that we got to say something about it. Or there was this big fight in baseball. That's about all the time they give to baseball. And I don't watch it much, but shoot, I worked at the place forever. And so I've been exposed to it. And Kellerman, I've liked, excuse me, for the most part. I think he's come off the rails in what bits and pieces I've seen fairly recently. But yeah, when it gets to college football, it's like, why? I know you need to talk about it, and I don't expect them to know every sport under the sun. That's what they're asked to do, but I get it. Shoot, there was a situation with one of them a few years ago regarding an NFL game in which they got torn to shreds online, and rightfully so, because they had no idea who was in the lineup, who wasn't in the lineup. I could go through the details, but I'm not going to, I hate to criticize other people. So we'll just leave it at that. It's my approach to say I don't know something when I don't know that. But I understand if it's Thursday afternoon and they've got a show and the Chargers and the Chiefs, I'm actually using a real scenario here, are playing that night and they've got to give a preview on Chargers and Chiefs. Well, they should be able to do that capably. It's one NFL game, but one of them did not and spewed out a ton of obviously inaccurate information and got called raked over the coals online. But it's not like I've never said anything that was slightly inaccurate or, I sit here and I probably am online how many hours a week? And just consider this, for every minute that I spend talking to you directly through the call-in show or posting a video and recording videos, or what I really need to be doing most of the time is trying to market this and sell it and build a business. I'm not learning about college football. I'm not keeping up with college football. That said, when I don't know something, it is my attempt to give you the little piece. If somebody says, Mark, analyze the Kansas State defense, you know what I'm going to say? I haven't had a chance to look at Kansas State. I don't know anything about their defense right now. I will be looking into it at some point this summer. I will have a preview on Kansas State. I will talk Kansas State at some point. But off the top of my head, I got nothing on Kansas State. Now, Kevin and I, in a previous phone call today, we started to delve into Georgia. Well, Georgia, I have familiarity, more than familiarity. I could name you 10 or 12 or 13 defensive players. So I talked about it. Talked about what I thought of Georgia's situation on defense. Kansas State, sorry, I can't keep track of everyone all the time. Would I love to have all the information locked down on Kansas State's defense? Yeah, I would love to sit and watch. I'll watch 3 games from last year and dissect their defense and look at their stat sheet and look at who's coming back and who they recruited and signed that may get a chance to be on the field. But they're one team out of 130 and one team out of 75 in the Power 5, roughly 75, 65, 75 in the Power 5. So I got to focus my attention and my knowledge base on where it's most going to be needed. I don't know why I got off into all that. There you go, John. I wonder how big Mark's staff is pulling together data and numbers versus Kellerman. That might be a difference. Yeah. Hman 998. So yeah, there are people both in mainstream media and online who just try to stir things up, and it's called clickbait. That's the term. I've been accused of that a couple times, of having some kind of headline or title on a video, and somebody said that was clickbait. Well, that's not my intention, and I think I've proven that in posting over 10,000 videos that that's not my trend, to be clickbaitish. And when it comes to controversial issues or having a controversial opinion, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Some people have the approach that they just want to play it safe and not be criticized, so they always take the light approach and don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or be considered out there. So you've got those people, then you've got people on the other end of the spectrum that just want to stir things up. And we see more of that because those are the people that get clicks, that just want to stir up things, say stupid things, just rile people up. Well, I just give my opinion. And sometimes that's going to be very mundane, somewhat generic, somewhat mainstream, because it's actually what I believe to be the case. This is the thought process on the national championship race this season by most people, and I'm pretty much in that same category. So I'm not going to make something up just to make it up and say Baylor's going to make a run to the college football playoff. But other times, most people believe this, but I'm over here, and as I've railed against the college football playoff and railed against scheduling for years, I've been a little bit of a contrarian, especially when it comes to scheduling and some other things. I've been a contrarian. I've challenged to national championships when people have said, no, Alabama obviously won the national championship. Let's look at this. Let's look at these teams. Let's look at what could have been decided for the playoff. Why are we just all assuming that what the playoff committee determines is what's best or right or correct? So my opinion is at least authentic. It's not motivated by me trying to stir things up, and it's not motivated by me trying to be popular or well-liked or say something that's not going to get criticized. It's just honest. So you can at least trust me for that. You can say, I don't know anything about college football. You can say all sorts of things. You can say, I can't talk. You can say, I'm boring, annoying, obnoxious, whatever. The only thing that nobody can criticize me for is not being authentic and honest. That's one thing I will promise. All right. Yeah, I do, Hman 998, believe that the Heisman Trophy most seasons is justified, is valid. Either that individual, in the case of a Devontae Smith, is overwhelmingly the choice, or I can understand, even if I don't agree, I can understand, as in the case of Derrick Henry in 2015, he won the Heisman Trophy. I would not have voted for him. I would have voted for Christian McCaffrey, but he deserved it. That's a fine choice. I have no issue with it. But down through history, there have been some curious Heisman votes. So maybe we do a series on that. As I mentioned near the beginning of the show, I am going to have a channel update that one part of me says that I should record and post so I can just explain it, graphically depict it, so everybody's on board with what we're going to do with the channel going forward. Another part of me that's a little bit more wants to engage with you and wants to, maybe is a little bit lazy, that doesn't want to just work through a video and write a bunch of stuff and structure it, that just wants to get on here and talk, wants to do it live and give a channel update, possibly during our 6 p.m. show on Monday, and give a channel update that everybody can understand and then ask questions and I can explain why. And so I've got to figure out today which one I'm going to do. So there will be a channel update, either posted video or a live stream soon. You know, it's funny. I had somebody criticize me on our SEC channel just last night because it has been my attempt to, on the team channels, to post videos as soon as possible when I see that there's been a transfer portal action taken, whether somebody's declared for the transfer portal or somebody is declared for a new school. So I've responded very quickly to transfer portal decisions and also commitments. And in this particular case, there was an Auburn defensive back. There was a defensive back playing at the FCS level who has transferred to Auburn. And so I cut a video. And one guy criticized it because he said, that guy's not that good and he's not going to make an impact. And why are you telling us about that or overhyping this? Well, I wasn't overhyping it. I was just explaining the details of the transaction and where he's been rated. These are his stats. We don't know anything about him. Nobody knows anything about him. Nobody's watching FCS football. He came from, oh, shoot, where was it? I don't remember. But nobody's watching, so nobody knows, but it's informational. And then I set up the Auburn secondary to say this is where we stand with the Auburn secondary right now. And it was just funny to get criticized for something that I was providing too much information, too much content. And before I could respond to this guy, somebody else, a number of people responded to say, get off his back. If you don't want it, then don't watch. All right. So I've tailed off into just everything possible. We've got no phone calls coming in, but I appreciate everybody online. I think we'll wrap it up right here. Hope everybody has a great Monday. And again, we will have a channel update of some sort early this week. I hope on Monday right here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you, DeAndre, BG, PO Football Funk, for your super chat contribution. And I would like to thank a number of people. I don't have the list of names in front of me right now who have contributed recently via Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. So keep that in mind, that Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App are available as well. So thank you so much for that. We will see you soon. And use that Amazon link. As I believe Roger stated, and somebody else, George, use that Amazon link. 160 million people per month using Amazon just in the U.S. And so I would ask you to please use the Amazon link. Same shopping experience. Do not have to spend an extra penny. And join us on Patreon, of course. Just search Mark Rogers TV or grab the Patreon link that we provide in the description section. All right, folks. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you soon.